Imagine being in a room full of voices. Some are welcoming and comforting, and they make you feel valued. Others are critical, cold, or simply silent when you need support the most. Have you ever asked yourself, among these voices, who really cares about me? The details of our connections often conceal the answer to this common question. Relationships are the essence of life. They shape who we are, how we see the world, and how we face challenges. However, not all relationships are healthy or enriching. Studies show that 65% of people remain in toxic relationships out of fear of confrontation or loneliness. This means that many carry unnecessary burdens, believing that maintaining these connections is their only choice. But here is something liberating. Recognizing when a relationship does not reflect genuine care is not an act of judgment but of self-compassion. God calls us to live in peace and grow spiritually. And this is only possible when we prioritize connections that uplift and abandon those that drain our energy and purpose. Today we will explore behaviors that indicate a lack of true care. More than just identifying these signs, you will learn to protect yourself emotionally and spiritually, staying aligned with God's plan for your life. If this message touches your heart, write in the comments, "I choose to prioritize relationships that reflect God's care." Send this message to someone who needs it today, and subscribe to the channel for more journey-inspiring reflections. The first behavior that indicates someone may not genuinely care about you is the lack of support in difficult times. These situations are like a filter that reveals the true essence of a relationship. People who disappear or show indifference when you need them most demonstrate that their presence is conditioned by convenience and not by a real commitment. The Bible teaches us in Proverbs 17:17, "A friend loves at all times. A brother is born for a time of adversity." This verse emphasizes that genuine concern is not solely evident during joyous occasions, but particularly during difficult times. Friends or partners who appear absent when life gets complicated may indicate a weaker bond. A common example of this behavior is the friend who is always present at parties, during laughter, and in enjoyable times, but disappears when you face a difficulty, such as an emotional crisis or a financial problem. He might ignore your messages, make up excuses not to help, or simply show no interest in your pain. This pattern reveals a one-sided relationship, where the other person only consumes your energy without reciprocating the care. True relationships require reciprocity. This does not mean that someone must be available 24 hours a day, but that there is a mutual effort to support and care for each other. A relationship may become unbalanced if support is inconsistent during difficult times. If you recognize this behavior in a close relationship, ask God for discernment to handle the situation. Reevaluating the connection is not an act of judgment, but of emotional and spiritual protection. God wants you to surround yourself with individuals who embody His love and provide support during challenging times. The second behavior that evidences a lack of genuine care in a relationship is the continuous disrespect for your boundaries. Boundaries are not barriers to keep people away, but ways to protect your emotional, spiritual, and physical health. They serve as a clear guide of what is acceptable in your life, and those who disrespect these boundaries show a lack of empathy and consideration for your individuality. The Bible highlights in Proverbs 4:23, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." This teaching emphasizes the importance of protecting what is essential for your peace and balance. When someone consistently ignores your boundaries, they are not only disrespecting you, but also harming the emotional safety environment that God desires for your life. A practical example of this behavior could be a friend who insists on bringing up topics or attitudes that you have already asked them to avoid, such as disrespectful comments or inappropriate jokes. It can also be a partner who pressures decisions you have already indicated you are not ready to make, or a coworker who constantly invades your personal time. These patterns of disrespect, even if they seem small, can undermine trust and cause emotional strain. According to studies from the Journal of Personal Relationships, healthy boundaries increase the quality of relationships by up to 40%. This happens because respecting boundaries demonstrates mutual care and creates a space where both parties can grow and feel safe. When one party disrespects these boundaries, the relationship becomes unbalanced and harmful. It's not enough to just establish boundaries. You also need to communicate them clearly and maintain them consistently. If someone insists on disrespecting your boundaries, even after you have expressed your needs, it is a sign that this person is not committed to a balanced and healthy relationship. Reevaluating these relationships is fundamental. It's not about rejecting or condemning the other, but about protecting your emotional and spiritual integrity. God calls us to live in peace and surround ourselves with people who uplift us. Well-defined and respected boundaries are an essential part of this process. Continuous disregard for boundaries indicates a need for reevaluation in a relationship. Mutual respect and the appreciation of each other's individuality form the foundation of healthy connections. When someone consistently disregards your boundaries, it's crucial to safeguard your tranquility and exercise discernment in handling the situation. The third behavior that can reveal a lack of genuine care in a relationship is the presence of constant and destructive criticism. Words have a profound impact on our lives. They can build bridges, strengthen bonds, and encourage, but they can also destroy, devalue, and generate insecurity. When a person frequently criticizes without offering constructive support, they create an atmosphere of devaluation that harms their self-esteem and confidence. The Bible teaches us in Ephesians 4:29, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." This verse reinforces the responsibility we have to use our words to build up and bring grace, not to hurt or humiliate. When someone constantly criticizes without offering solutions or support, their words lose their edifying purpose and become an emotional burden. A professional environment provides a clear example of this behavior. Imagine a coworker who constantly points out your mistakes but never acknowledges your achievements or the effort you put into tasks. This type of attitude creates a toxic environment where you constantly feel undervalued and incapable of meeting expectations. In personal relationships, this can manifest in a partner or friend who frequently makes negative comments about your choices, appearance, or abilities, without offering any words of encouragement. Healthy relationships have room for criticism, but it should be constructive and always come with the intention to help. Someone might respectfully point out an area where you need to improve and support your growth. This type of criticism is a sign of care, as it targets your well-being and development. On the other hand, constant and destructive criticism is not meant to help but to belittle. They slowly erode your self-esteem and create a cycle of insecurity, where you start to doubt yourself and your abilities. This type of behavior can be harmful not only emotionally, but also spiritually, as it affects the way you perceive the value that God has placed in you. When you notice this pattern in a relationship, ask if the person is willing to have an honest conversation and change their approach. If that doesn't happen, it may be necessary to set clear boundaries to protect your peace and emotional health. Words possess the ability to either construct or demolish. The third behavior to observe is the presence of constant and destructive criticism. Healthy relationships are those that you choose to build, offering criticism that encourages rather than devalues. If someone in your life has the habit of criticizing without building up, reevaluate that connection with wisdom and prayer. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and give it a like. It helps us a lot. Thank you. The fourth behavior that reveals a lack of genuine care in a relationship is egocentrism. When someone makes everything revolve around themselves, consistently ignoring their partner's needs, it demonstrates a disconnection from the essence of a healthy relationship. This kind of mindset transforms the relationship into a one-sided relationship, where only one party gains and the other is continuously neglected. The Bible teaches us in Philippians 2:4, each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. This verse highlights the importance of looking beyond oneself to consider the needs, feelings, and perspectives of others. True relationships require reciprocity, where both parties show genuine interest and mutual care. Friendships where one person dominates the dynamic are a common example of egocentric behavior. Imagine a friend who always expects your attention to talk about their own problems, successes, or opinions, but never asks how you are or shows interest in your life. This pattern may seem subtle at first, but over time, it reveals that the connection is based on this person's unilateral benefit. This type of behavior can also occur in romantic, family, or professional relationships. A partner who constantly ignores your opinions or a coworker who always prioritizes their demands over yours are clear examples of how egocentrism can manifest. These dynamics create an environment where you feel undervalued and emotionally overwhelmed. Balance characterizes healthy relationships. This implies that while one person may occasionally require more attention or support, the dynamic should gradually stabilize. Care and genuine interest are signs of a solid connection, where both parties feel heard, valued, and respected. If you identify this behavior in a relationship, it is important to evaluate it honestly. Ask yourself, does this person show genuine interest in me? Or are they always focused only on themselves? If you notice a pattern of egocentrism, consider starting a conversation to express how it affects you. In many cases, people do not realize they are being egocentric and may be willing to change. However, if there is no openness to dialogue or change, it may be necessary to set boundaries to protect your emotional health. God created us to live in communion, and this includes demonstrating mutual care and empathy. God's plan for healthy relationships, based on respect and reciprocity, does not align with egocentrism. The fifth behavior that indicates a lack of genuine care in a relationship is the presence of manipulation or control. These patterns mask selfish intentions and often deprive you of your emotional, spiritual, and even physical freedom. Relationships of this kind do not reflect genuine love or care, but rather a desire to exert power over the other. The Bible teaches us in 2 Corinthians 3:17, "Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom." This freedom includes the emotional and spiritual autonomy that God desires for all His children. A relationship that tries to control or manipulate another person's choices, emotions, or beliefs is contrary to the divine principles of respect and free will. Manipulation can take subtle forms, such as a person who constantly makes you feel guilty about meeting their demands, or who uses silence as emotional punishment. On the other hand, a partner who monitors your actions, limits your freedom of choice, or forces you to abandon your values and beliefs can be more obvious. Studies by the American Psychological Association show that people involved in manipulative relationships have a 50% higher risk of developing chronic anxiety. This happens because constant control undermines trust and creates an environment of insecurity, where the manipulated person feels that they are never enough or that they are always wrong. A practical example of manipulation could be a friend who insists on testing you emotionally, threatening to distance themselves if you don't meet their expectations. Another example is a boss who uses the fear of job loss to demand more than is fair. Emotional blackmail in romantic relationships occurs when one partner threatens to end the relationship or isolate the other if they do not comply. Healthy relationships promote autonomy and mutual growth. This means that decisions should be based on dialogue and respect, not on coercion or fear. When someone tries to control your actions or manipulate your emotions, they are compromising your ability to live the freedom that God desires for your life. If you identify manipulation or control in any relationship, the first step is to recognize the patterns. Ask yourself, is this person helping me grow or trying to mold me to their expectations? Taking this recognition to God in prayer is essential, asking for wisdom and courage to deal with the situation. In some cases, It may be necessary to seek external help, such as counselors or spiritual leaders, to establish healthy boundaries or even to distance oneself. The sixth behavior that demonstrates a lack of genuine care in a relationship is indifference to your happiness. People who ignore or devalue your achievements and joys show an emotional disconnection that compromises the quality of the bond. This lack of interest not only creates a distance, but can also demotivate you from sharing your achievements and pursuing your dreams. The Bible instructs us in Romans 12:15, "Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn." This verse reflects the principle of empathy and mutual connection that should exist in a healthy relationship. When someone does not celebrate your achievements or does not show enthusiasm for your happiness, the essential element of reciprocity is missing. In relationships marked by indifference, the dynamic can be perceived in situations such as a friend who never acknowledges your victories or a partner who doesn't engage when you share something important. For example, when talking about a professional achievement or a goal reached, the person may react apathetically, change the subject, or even downplay the value of what you did. These behaviors make it clear that your joys do not hold the same weight or importance for her. Major events do not always warrant recognition. Even small achievements, such as overcoming a personal challenge or accomplishing something you are proud of, are opportunities to strengthen bonds through mutual support. Constantly ignoring these moments leads to an imbalanced and superficial relationship. Genuine relationships stand out for their ability to celebrate the happiness of the other. This practice strengthens bonds and demonstrates a genuine interest in the emotions and achievements of those around you. On the other hand, indifference creates barriers that compromise the depth and quality of the connection. If you notice this behavior frequently, it's crucial to assess the relationship. Talking openly about how the lack of interest affects you can help clarify the situation. However, if the pattern continues even after the conversation, it may be necessary to reevaluate that person's place in your life to protect your emotional health. Therefore, the sixth behavior to watch out for is indifference to your happiness. Empathy and mutual celebration characterize healthy relationships. When someone does not value your achievements and joys, it signals a need to reevaluate the connection with discernment and wisdom. The seventh behavior that characterizes a lack of genuine care in a relationship is constant emotional drainage. This type of behavior manifests itself when a person seems to consume their energy continuously, bringing negativity, recurring crises, or excessive demands. Instead of an energizing relationship, you end up feeling drained after every interaction, as if you're carrying an emotional weight that isn't your own. The Bible comforts us in Matthew 11:28. "Come to me, all you who are laboring and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." This passage reflects God's desire for our lives, to live in peace, not carrying burdens that do not belong to us. A healthy relationship should reflect this principle, being a space where we find support and balance, and no longer tiredness and exhaustion. People who constantly drain their emotional energy can exhibit different behaviors. Maybe it's someone who always brings up problems but never seeks solutions. There's nothing wrong with supporting the one we love during difficult times, but when it becomes an ongoing pattern, the relationship loses balance. Or maybe it's someone who demands too much of your time and attention without worrying about your limitations. This dynamic can give you the impression that you're constantly putting the other's needs ahead of your own. These relationships over time can impact not only your emotional health, but also your spirituality. Emotional exhaustion can make it difficult for you to connect with God, making it harder to find the time and energy to seek rest and strength in Him. The constant drain creates a cycle of tiredness that interferes with your ability to discern the divine will for your relationships. Dealing with this type of behavior requires the courage to set limits. Defining how far you can go without compromising your emotional health is a form of self-care. It is not a matter of rejecting or alienating people, but of clearly communicating what is necessary to preserve their peace. For example, Telling a friend or family member, "I care a lot about you, but I need to take care of myself too," is an act of honesty that can benefit both of you. God wants us to live surrounded by relationships that build us up, not consume us. Recognizing that a relationship is out of balance is not selfishness, but wisdom. When you choose to protect your peace and seek rest in God, you are aligning your decisions with the divine plan for your life. Your emotional energy is precious, and spending it on relationships that constantly drain you can prevent you from living with fullness and purpose. The seventh behavior reminds us that healthy relationships should energize, not exhaust. God calls us to seek connections that reflect His love and care while providing balance and mutual support. Ask God for discernment and the courage to make necessary decisions to protect your peace if you find yourself constantly overwhelmed. The eighth behavior that evidences a lack of genuine care in a relationship is the absence of empathy. Empathy is the ability to put oneself in the other's shoes, to feel and understand their emotions and experiences. When empathy is lacking in a relationship, there is a clear disinterest in the emotional needs of those who are by our side. Without this foundation, the bond becomes superficial and disconnected. The Bible teaches us at Galatians 6:2, "Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ." This orientation reflects God's heart for relationships, sharing loads, walking side by side, and showing genuine care for the experiences of others. When someone refuses to acknowledge or validate their feelings, they are ignoring a fundamental principle for healthy connection. Family interactions provide a practical example of a lack of empathy. Imagine sharing something that's bothering you, perhaps an emotional challenge or an important goal, and noticing that the person you're talking to shows no interest, ignores the topic, or even makes comments that devalue how you feel. This can be deeply frustrating because a lack of recognition validates the idea that your emotions aren't important. The absence of empathy is harmful because it undermines trust and emotional security within the relationship. A barrier prevents true closeness when someone doesn't care or try to understand your feelings. This behavior can cause you to emotionally isolate yourself, opting to withhold information out of fear of ignoring or rejecting you. Relationships are highly valuable because empathy is a reciprocal process. Understanding the other means showing through actions and words that their emotions and experiences matter. It is listening carefully, validating feelings, and offering support without judgment or indifference. It is the foundation that transforms superficial connections into deep and meaningful bonds. When empathy is absent, emotional imbalance becomes evident. Imagine always being available to listen to and support a person, but never receiving the same in return. When you don't reciprocate care, the relationship can become exhausting. A lack of empathy can even cause you to question your own worth, feeling disregarded or unloved. Reevaluating a relationship where empathy is absent doesn't mean cutting ties immediately. First, it is important to try to understand the reasons behind this behavior. Some people have a difficult time expressing empathy because they haven't learned how to do it, are emotionally overwhelmed, or simply don't realize the impact of their actions. In cases like this, an honest conversation can help. Saying something like, "When I share my feelings, I feel sad when it feels like they aren't important to you," can be a starting point for restoring connection. On the other hand, if a lack of empathy is a recurring pattern and there is no willingness to change, it may be necessary to set clear boundaries or even step aside. Healthy relationships need balance, and when that's not possible, protecting your emotional health becomes essential. God calls us to live in peace and to seek connections that reflect His love, where both parties feel cared for and valued. Empathy also has a spiritual impact. When we show empathy, we are fulfilling a commandment from God, according to Galatians 6:2. Carrying each other's burdens means being present in a meaningful way, relieving the pain or emotional burden that the other is facing. On the other hand, the lack of empathy prevents this exchange from happening, leaving the other isolated in their struggles. Lack of empathy is not just a relational problem. It is a barrier to emotional and spiritual connection. When we recognize this behavior in our lives, Whether as those who suffer from the absence of empathy or as those who have difficulty showing it, we should seek God's guidance. He teaches us to love one another with patience, compassion, and understanding. Empathy is what transforms a simple act of listening into a gesture of love and care. It is not enough to listen to words. It is necessary to see the heart behind them. When someone chooses to ignore their feelings or devalue their experiences, they are breaking a fundamental principle for a healthy relationship. The eighth behavior, the lack of empathy, is a clear sign that something is out of balance. Mutual respect and validation form the foundation of healthy relationships. To handle a relationship that doesn't value your emotions, ask God for guidance. He always wants us to live in relationships that build and strengthen our walk, reflecting His love for us. We have reached a crucial point to reflect on everything that has been said and make decisions that can transform the way we live our relationships. This is not just a time for learning, but for action. God gives us discernment to identify the behaviors that shape the relationships around us, and He also invites us to make choices that promote peace, growth, and alignment with His purpose. Throughout this content, we have seen behaviors that reveal a lack of genuine care, such as the absence of support, disrespect for boundaries, destructive criticism, and lack of empathy. But most importantly, these situations, while challenging, are opportunities to grow and seek healthier connections. Identifying toxic patterns is not an act of judgment, but a step of courage to prioritize your peace and emotional health. Now, we want to hear from you. What behaviors have you identified in your relationships? How did God help you to deal with them? Write in the comments your experience or reflections on this topic. Sharing your story can inspire others who are facing similar challenges. Your voice has power, and your testimony may be what someone needs to hear to step up in faith and courage. Also, think of someone who can benefit from this message. Consider a friend, a family member, or even a coworker who is struggling with challenging relationships. Share this message with that person. Sometimes a simple gesture of sending can be the beginning of a significant transformation in her life. Be a channel of blessing, spreading words of hope and encouragement. If this reflection has spoken to your heart, subscribe to the channel to receive more messages that edify and strengthen your spiritual journey. Here, each content is prepared with the aim of bringing direction, comfort, and a clear vision of God's plans for your life. By signing up, you'll be connecting with a community of people who are also seeking to grow in faith and build connections that reflect God's love. Remember, your peace is valuable. Don't allow unbalanced relationships to steal your joy or distract you from the purpose God has prepared. Trust that He is faithful to guide your decisions and strengthen your choices. Whenever you feel doubt or insecurity, return to Jesus' invitation in Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. As you wrap up, reflect on the impact each relationship has on your life. Which of these reflect God's care? Which ones align with the peace and purpose that God desires for you? It's not about abandoning or rejecting people, but about prioritizing connections that build and demonstrate mutual care. The Holy Spirit is at your side, ready to help you discern what needs to be adjusted and how to walk in obedience to God's will. Finally, state in faith in the comments, I choose to prioritize relationships that reflect God's care. This phrase is not just a statement, but a decision to seek connections that value, respect, and encourage who you are. God wants you to live surrounded by people who love you with the same care He has for you. Your journey is just beginning, and each step toward healthy relationships is one step closer to living the abundant life God has planned for you. Trust God to guide you to connections that build your life and strengthen your faith. Recognizing harmful behaviors in our relationships is no straightforward task. Often we are so emotionally involved that we ignore warning signs or justify attitudes that, deep down, we know to be harmful. However, identifying these dynamics is an act of wisdom and courage. God does not call us to live under unnecessary burdens. He wants our connections to be sources of peace, growth, and edification. Every relationship has the power to mold who we are. Some bring us closer to God, strengthen our faith, and help us grow. Others, however, can drain our strength, divert us from God's purpose, and leave us emotionally exhausted. That's why discerning the patterns in our connections is essential. Despite its difficulty, this process is essential to living the full life God has planned for you. The Bible reminds us at Galatians 6:2, "Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ." This passage not only calls us to support others, but also teaches us that relationships should be spaces of reciprocity. When someone chooses not to carry the burdens with you, but instead increases them, it is time to reevaluate that relationship with prayer and wisdom. God gives us the freedom to choose the people with whom we share our lives. He wants us to live surrounded by healthy connections that promote spiritual, emotional, and even physical growth. If you're in a relationship that constantly leaves you feeling overwhelmed, unappreciated, or disconnected, ask God what He wants you to do. He will always be ready to offer wisdom and direction. Ending or redefining unhealthy relationships can seem daunting, but remember that God never calls us to carry burdens that He has not placed in our lives. When we surrender our connections to Him, trusting in His direction, we find the peace and clarity needed to make the right decisions. Every step toward a healthy relationship is also one step closer to God's purpose for your life. God never calls us to carry burdens that He has not asked of us. Trust in His direction to cultivate relationships that build and reflect His love. By prioritizing healthy connections, you will be aligning your life with the divine plan and experiencing the freedom and peace He desires for you.